Oh my gosh. All right. I have 30 minutes and I am going to pack them full. Hopefully, the first 20% will be all the problems, and you heard some of them from Stuart. But the other 60%, I hope, or 80% will be solutions that work. I joke that we in the Philippines, we moved from hell to purgatory, while you guys are just going to hell. So, um, some lessons from us. Let me just quickly go through, right? Journalism. First of all, I wouldn't be standing in front of you without so many people in this room having helped us. And I think that, I hope, is what you take out of this 30 minutes is two words: radical collaboration. It was the only way we survived. So radical collaboration. This is my news group in the Philippines. We're about 100 to 120 people. At our height, we were getting 90 million page views a month. But, of course, as every news organization knows today, that has gone down. One of the most interesting things that I asked, that journey that we went through, starting in 2016 when Rodrigo Duterte was elected, was 90 hate messages per hour, was attacks both bottom up from social media and then top down from the law, right? What happens when the law is weaponized? This is what I wrote in 2022. The question I asked Filipinos then is this: what will you sacrifice for the truth? Since then, it's moved everywhere. And I'll end with this part to show you why we're living in an information Armageddon, right? Information integrity is the mother of all battles. In all of this, there's roughly 25 translations, I think. German was the first one with English. It came out at the exact same time. The French are really more straightforward. How to Stand Up to a Dictator became Resist the Dictators. The Japanese, a little bit more passive. There's no dictator in the title at all. It's all about social media. And the Koreans, of course, we know what happened in Korea at the end of last year. Mandarin, my part of the world is, I cannot wait to see what happens in 2026. Did I mention if China moves against Taiwan, the first stop will be the Philippines? And Georgia, have you been watching? More than a year of daily protests in Georgia. Of course, all of that. There's a Ukrainian translation that is coming out, right? This is it. 2026 is it, the mother of all battles. And it all begins with information integrity. Mongolia, between China and Russia. And Americans are looking because in October last year, it became number 3, 2 years after it was published, right? Okay, everything I'm writing to you, everything I'm saying to you, the data is there. And I actually wound up writing 400 pages. My editor chopped it down by 50%. He said, do you want people to know everything you know, or do you want them to read it from cover to cover? You can read it from cover to cover, right? Let's go. What's the problem? It's right here, right? Artificial intelligence is neither artificial nor intelligent. And it has been around for more than 70 years. You heard from Stuart where it's gone, but there have been 2 main pathways, and there have been hundreds of billions now invested in this new generative AI. But at the core is a toxic surveillance model. That's critically important. Everything about you has now been digitized. You have digital clones running around. We know this really well from Rappler. And what are the harms that we've lived through? So much, right? For us, the surveillance and digital colonialism, we are the content moderators for you in the global north. We go through it first so that you can use the platforms. Biased and oppressive AI systems, if one editor kills a story because of a bias or because of whatever reason, that's one editor and one story. When it's coded, it becomes millions, hundreds of millions, and you can't even see it. Exploitation of data workers. Again, In 2016, the top 2 countries, the top 2 cities of content moderators for Facebook was Manila and Warsaw. Fascinating. Sorry, let's go back. The environmental damage from resource-intensive AI operations, you're just learning about them now. And then finally, well, I don't know if you saw Sam Altman saying he would need, that OpenAI alone, one company, would need the power of 250,000 nuclear power plants. One company. And then finally, this I lived through, the destruction of agency and democracy. As of March last year, this is a VDEM study, 72% of the world is now under authoritarian rule. We're literally electing illiberal leaders democratically. Did you do that because you chose it or because you've been the topic, the subject, the target of information operations? Well, let me show you what that will look like. Here's where crisis and opportunity goes hand in hand. When the Philippine government tried to shut us down in January 2018, within 4 months, we dropped 49% of our advertising revenue because the government just picked up the phone and called our advertisers and told them not to advertise, 49%. So we splintered off our data gathering arm. And you know the best part about being the target of attacks? It's a blessing and a curse. It's a curse because you get 90 hate messages per hour, but it's a blessing because you get all the data, right? And you can study the data, which is what we did. We splintered off a second company called Nerve. I can tell you about it now because I have won 10 of 11 criminal charges since 2016. But Nerve stands, and this is what we've found, and I want to make sure you know 2 things out of it. How do information operations work? Because many people think that, it's only one post on social media, it doesn't matter. Or it's just that group being pains, they're being nasty. It's not true. Here's the way it works. There are 2 phases. There's a seeding phase, and then there's the opportunistic amplification. Steffi talked about when you say a lie 1,000,000 times. Well, this breaks that apart, right? How do you first drop the meta-narrative? And think about this in Ukraine in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea. So malign actors craft disinformation narratives. Then there's an echo chamber reinforcement that's built in because of the design of the technology. Then every single opportunity, every single crisis you exploit, you hit it again and again and again until people think it's true. And you keep going. You keep building, right? So the algorithms of social media will push you aside, will push us into our own bubbles. But more than that, it allows this. And it just continues until the lie is normalized, until you think the lie is real, right? And when that happens, there's a shift that happens. And you don't even realize it. We saw this in the Philippines. That's one of the ways. Let me take you to one of the reports we did in the UK. And this one is during the riots, the Southport riot, right? And again, this can happen in any country. It has happened in the United States on January 6th. But this one was fascinating because it's last year, the middle of last year. And there's an event that happens, and then what happened after that? All the false claims. Beyond that, the false claims, they were wrong, but it doesn't matter because it had already spread. Despite the corrections, the disinformation spread rapidly through far-right networks. It triggered violent anti-immigrant protests in at least 27 towns and cities across the UK. Let's break it down in that same way that we did the first one, right? So this is the way it breaks down, and let me show you the graph. Narrative building, echo chamber reinforcement, the crisis exploitation, the malign actor, amplification. The reason we called the company The Nerve is because it literally tracks the nervous system of our public information ecosystem. Immigration in the United States, for example, is the conversation that is most unaligned, the most separated from reality, right? Who says fact check? Fact checking doesn't work. Let me take you to a report that we did mid last year and then released at the end of last year. It's fascinating because, again, it shows you how narrative warfare breaks down reality. Here we go. In this one, if you remember, 143 executive orders in the first 100 days of President Trump. 143. And the goal was not to win a policy debate, which is what we journalists, what most of us try to do in a public information ecosystem, right? It's not about the ideas. It's about the emotions. And the goal, to dismantle democratic checks and balances, fuel a conflict that breaks down a shared reality. That's the goal, which is why I love seeing you in our shared reality. Here's the self-perpetuating feedback loop in every country we have worked in. I lived through it in the Philippines, but it was perfected here in America a year ago. The trigger, the executive order that is amplified through a decentralized network of influencers and media outlets and is reinforced by the design of the platforms where they spread, and then you continue going, right? Political legitimacy no longer won through policy debate. It's not about ideas. It's allegiance within competing, self-reinforcing realities. You guys are living through this now. I'll just share one of 4 findings, and you can find the rest of the report because I want to get to the solutions, right? Narrative warfare is real, and if you're on social media, you're targeted. The primary output of this, so this is, we cluster in messaging and then the networks that spread the messaging. And when you look at it, the topic maps of each one, you can see these 3 things, that identity conflicts have displaced policy debates. You can dive down into the report deeper. You can look at it on nerve.com. But here's the part that's fascinating to me. The American map was identical to the Philippine map. And I bet if I did it in Germany or if I did it in any other country, it would be very similar. And you see the exact same things. Mainstream media shifts here. It's fragmented and reactive. These are the folks who you think will be defending reality, but mainstream media is also under attack, right? We were being threatened with shutdown. I was facing almost a century, in fact, 103 years in prison cumulatively. The right-leaning media goes far out here. It's cohesive, it's insulated, it's extremely organized. But here's the part that's more fascinating to me. Here's the endgame, because we saw it in the Philippines, we saw it in every single one of the countries. And I think, let me say it first, and then let me say what will happen if we do not act now in the countries that still have democracy. The narrative warfare and the breakdown of reality, what does that achieve? It breaks down the checks and balances of a democratic institution. The Philippines has a constitution like the United States. Ours is patterned after the US. Duterte broke it down and became the most powerful president we had ever had in 6 months. I would posit it happened faster in the United States. And then what happens when you break down the checks and balances? This is what we've seen in country to country. In fact, right now, Rappler in the Philippines is doing anti-corruption investigative reporting that is, again, mobilizing our people and demanding checks and balances. But here's where we are in much of the West: strategic corruption and kleptocracy. When you are driven by power and profits. Did I mention big tech? Big tech, I hope you were here and listening. Because if you don't fix this, it's coming after you. It's that Niemöller quote, right? Sorry. Here we go. So this is part of it, but let me keep going. This is what we found last year, were the memes, all of these. So first, let's trace Venezuela. It was first posted in 2017. I can't see it. And then reposted here in 2024. This became a meme. And then it just kept getting reposted in January 2025. That was when we saw a surge. And then what happened? December 4th, the National Security Strategy of the United States was released. It became policy. And then on January 3rd, 2026, it became reality, right? Narrative warfare, the breakdown of reality. Long-term messaging, viral social media posts consistently rebranded the Venezuelan regime as terrorists, building legal and public consent. It's ironic, of course. Let me not go dive into it more. There's more. We keep going, right? Because we got to find solutions. Oh, yeah, I had to put this in because we're in Germany. Remember this? So this just came out 13 hours ago, I guess. And then I looked at the comments, and someone asked Grok this question. And it says it. It's not even hidden anymore, folks, right? So it's straight out. So you have to look. You cannot bury your head in the sand because 2026 is it. All right. So what did we do? Well, first, in November of 2022, look how long ago this was, we launched this out of Oslo at the Nobel Peace Library, at the Nobel Museum, a 10-point action plan to reclaim our rights. The world has gotten worse. We haven't reclaimed our rights. But let me state those 3 things one more time. Stop surveillance for profit, right? Because that insidious manipulation in our public information ecosystem takes away our agency. 2, stop coded bias, because if you are a woman, LGBTQ+, if you are brown or black, if you're an ethnic minority, if you are marginalized in any way in the physical world, you are further marginalized online. It is coded in. And then finally, the last one, journalism as an antidote to tyranny. Almost half. Okay, and here's the solutions, right? You gotta know the problem in order to find the solutions. So how do we move forward? As you heard from Stuart, it's gotten significantly worse because now we can't even tell. Before it was the repetition. Now you really can't tell fact from fiction. I have deep fakes that are telling people with diabetes to throw away their insulin. If you see me telling you to buy crypto, it's not me, okay? But here are the 3 things that these were the pillars of Rappler, and those were how we began to try to solve the problem. I've been warning about it since 2016. Technology, that's the part that I want to show you. Journalism and community. This is a community. How are you mobilizing yourselves in this day and age, right? Here's the first one for journalists. 6 to 8 months before journalism dies. I haven't been that wrong in many of my predictions. If you look at the data from news organizations today, the big tech is these companies, Facebook in 2023 began choking traffic to news sites. In 2024, we had Google using generative AI, so you never come to our websites, right? So what we tried to do is to give emergency funding directly to news organizations. We launched the International Fund for Public Interest Media. It's based out of Paris. 2022, $60 million, not a whole heck of a lot of money, but it is direct funding to keep the news organizations operating. Here's the second one, on community. On community, again, we learned a lot being attacked. So you gotta embrace whatever you're most afraid of, because what we learned was you gotta organize. And if you're organizing in the physical world, you had better be organizing in the virtual world. So what we did in 2021, the end of 2021, we would have done it sooner, except that Nobel Peace Prize got in the way. I couldn't complain. But we organized about 150 different groups and broke it down in 4 layers. The first layer, 16 news organizations. Do you know how difficult it is to get news organizations to work together? It's great fun, but we did it. Fact-checking layer number 1. You have to actually do this, fact-checking. The second layer is the distribution layer. We called it the mesh. And every single member of the 150 news groups, if your group has 100 people and you're part of this coalition, you every day will post 1 fact check a day, but you will add emotion. And you cannot use anger. And that's the second layer. 116 civil society groups, the church joined, that was great. Even Pope Francis at one point joined, I think. Then you had research, the universities. We gave them the data, because what's missing from universities is actual data, right? And every week, they literally told us, this is the narrative that's being seeded, this is who it's attacking, this is who benefits. And finally, the last layer, accountability. 6 different legal firms right across the board. And it became really important because when we rolled out the Facts First PH Philippines, the Supreme Court, the Solicitor General of the Philippines filed a case against Rappler and me, saying that fact-checking is prior restraint. To those who are not lawyers, it's not, right? It's not. So here's what happened. So we did this, and come back. We did this, and we found that we could make a map. This is the map of the Philippines broken down. Much more complicated in America, but we broke down into 4 clusters. And what we found was the news, people who follow news and tweet news are about the same. The artists, the activists, but the faith groups became really important at that point. And then what we began to do was to literally work together so that we could find boundary spanners to spread the facts. And we invited the politicians to join us, right? We invited the politicians to join us. And what did we do? We were able to take over the center of the public information ecosystem before our 2022 elections. The blue are our partners, the orange are boundary spanners or linkers, and the yellow, that's the spread. If you mobilize in the physical world, you mobilize in the virtual world, right? Because that's all we had. But here's the part, and here's the last part. Great, I still have time. Yay. The most important. Here's the public interest tech stack. You've heard a little bit about, we have to tweak the messaging. If we stay in these platforms, no matter what messaging you do, your data is corrupted. Because ultimately, it is done for profit. And it isn't done for facts. None of the tech, whether it's social media or generative AI, are actually anchored in facts. When you look at the chatbots, they're probabilistic machines. Right? So they're not anchored in facts. Anyway, so what did we do? 4 years ago, we began thinking about building something called that will bring our community together, not in individual social media, but a shared reality like this is. Right? So we all see the same thing. We used the matrix protocol. The Germans and the French will know this because all the German government websites are on the matrix protocol. And what I liked about it is that it had 150 million addressable users. This was as of 3 years ago when we first started building. It's decentralized, it's open source, it's end-to-end encrypted. And it was created by the Element team. It's out of the UK, and it was rolled out in 2014. Here's the part that's fascinating to me. Look at who uses it, right? Look at who's using this right now. I mean, why do intelligence and military and government get privacy and get security when we don't? It's a question I had, and I just didn't want to keep playing whack-a-mole by playing the narrative warfare game without tech on the side of facts. So this is what we built. This is a clear statement of the problem, right? Because each of these are siloed, and they make money off of us. But what we want to do is something like the matrix. The German government is here, the French government is here, but we could do news federations. We could come together in many different ways. Think Mastodon, but much easier, because the problem with Mastodon, when you federate on Mastodon, is you have to have a DNS server, you have to know where to go. But here, all we did was we built a login to a news website, and that's how you come into the matrix. I was going to wear my Matrix long thing today, but the Matrix, it actually works. Why do I say that? Because here's the way it breaks down. If this is Rappler, and let's say that's Deutsche Welle up top, if Tom follows Rappler and Susan follows Deutsche Welle, Tom and Susan can talk to each other without the news groups ever sharing any data. You get to keep data privacy. You get to keep your data, right? And what about all those other things? Do we have to migrate from everyone? No, it can be interoperable. That thing up top, you can connect to any non-matrix app. You don't have to leave your communities there. So we did us, and then we brought on other Philippine news groups. The Philippine Press Institute has 65 community news organizations. The Sun Star Cebu, which is in the Visayas, and The Guardian in Iloilo. We just launched this in September last year, and it's working. We need a shared reality. I'm working for our next presidential elections. Now, I want to show you what it looks like in real life, and I'm going to hope that you will be able to see it. Yes. Oh, yay! Okay. I love trying things without having tried this before. So, this is the Rappler website, right? This is the layer of the Matrix protocol. A news organization can create their own channels here, but you can also lock your channel. So our NGO partners have their own locked channels. We did this, our own chatbot, right? The public chatbots that are open, because they're all over, the idea of putting as much data as possible is still what drives this. It's part of the reason our server costs for news organizations have increased. We're paying people, we're paying more for the tech companies in chatbots to be making money to steal our content. That's what every news group is doing, right? So here, what we did is we took the data lake we had, we did a graph rag, and we created, let's see where it begins. We created our own chatbot that you can only get from the Matrix protocol. And the chatbot, so Ryan is asking, what are the allocables in the national budget? This responds, Ryan, and then it gives the list of every single one. Because I'm a journalist, and I want it anchored in facts. Our people continue to ask questions like this. How to request Rappler to conduct an investigation? Well, we respond because every single channel has a real Rappler on it, right? It was the way we could restore trust with our communities, right? Person to person. And finally, one of the things I want to show you is the Philippine politics. We just broke a ton of stories on corruption. Yay, I still have 2 minutes left. Ha! You can see here that this is where we have the conversations with our community, and this is where we can answer their questions without being attacked, right? I can tell you what it's like to be attacked. Finally, the last thing I want to show you is we built this out of necessity. Little Rappler couldn't afford Slack. So look, we had a little part which is a workspace, and I want to, this is what's bad when you're, go, poof. Because we built it so that we could use it as workspaces, we also built a bulletin board. Okay, while that's doing, I still have a minute left. Yay! Okay, it shouldn't take that long, but it also then allows me to show you this. This is how many people are in the environment and science, and it acts like a blog and can be shared like a blog, and it can be shared inside. Look, let me end with this, because I now have 30 seconds left. This is the moment when, if we don't do enough, we will see news organizations die, or at the very least, co-opted. I lived through this in the Philippines. I knew when fear works, you acknowledge it works. I used to think I wanted more Filipinos to stand up, but fear works. And now when I compare I feel like I have both PTSD and deja vu because I'm living through it again in America, right? So here's the thing. We need to build the tech so that we can get off the platforms that insidiously manipulate us, that are breaking down reality. We also need to do this to protect ourselves as we move into what Stuart has actually told you about. So this is our attempt. We're a small little news group of about 120 people in the Philippines. You can try it yourself. And please tell me, oh, I forgot to show you Maria's journal. I get to say and do things in this that actually I've never been able to do on social media, because the 10 rules of moderation are the same 10 rules we would have in the physical world, right? And since we rolled this out in December 2023, 3 strikes and you're out. That's our rule. We banned 3 accounts. When you live in an area of lawlessness that exploits you, that is extractive and is predatory, you create people like that. I believe we are good. I believe human beings are basically good. We need to get back to a place that doesn't have toxic sludge and allows our leaders to govern, allows our people to hold our governments accountable. Thank you.